Meet our protagonist, Ares, aka Mr. Deja Vu. After surviving a near-death accident, he woke up with the wildest glitch ever. He could see short flashes of the future. Even though for some it's a cool ability, but for Ares, it's basically a curse, because his visions only show what's about to go down a few minutes ahead, and they show up whenever they feel like it, making his life a living nightmare. One day, Ares was standing by the side of the road, lost in thought, when he spotted a pretty girl about to cross the road right into the path of an oncoming car. He froze, thinking it was happening, but this was actually him seeing the future. When he came back to his senses, he was both shocked and relieved to see the girl still perfectly safe. But the second the pedestrian light turned green, Ares rushed forward and quickly grabbed the girl from behind, trying to save her from the tragic accident, but accidentally cuddled her Jigglypuffs, causing the startled girl to freak out. Embarrassed, he tried to explain that he was only trying to save her from an oncoming yellow car. But the girl, irritated, called him a certified creep and served him a hot slappuccino across his cheeks. Furious, she stomped off, leaving him standing there with his hand on his cheek. But just as she left, the exact yellow sports car from Ayace's vision really did speed past. At home later that day, Ayako, the lady who had taken Ayace since he was a boy, told him to go pick up his school uniform. Frustrated, Ayace groaned and asked why she didn't just tell him earlier, making an excuse, but the real reason was she forgot. Ares really didn't want to go out again, especially after his slap to the face episode, but he needed his school uniform. On the way, Ares was suddenly hit with another vision while crossing the bridge. This time he saw two boys running by. One of them, a black-haired boy, was carrying an action figure. In the vision, the boy accidentally bumped into Ares and dropped his toy into the river. The boy then flipped out, blaming Ares for the whole thing. Snapping back to reality, Ares groaned internally, realizing it wouldn't be long before everyone around would think he was the jerk who tossed some poor boy's toy into the water. So when Ares saw the same two boys from his vision running toward him, he quickly stepped aside, hoping to avoid the whole mess. He felt pretty pleased that, for once, his weird power had actually saved him from what could have been a seriously awkward moment. But just as he started to relax, he was shocked to see that, even after dodging them, the toy still somehow ended up falling into the river anyway. As the boys argued and blamed each other for being reckless, a girl nearby stepped up and promised to get the toy back for them. She walked right up to the edge of the bridge, and Ares, a little alarmed, asked what she thought she was doing. With total confidence, the girl announced she was going to rescue the toy. Without hesitation, she dove into the river like she was an Olympic swimmer. At first, Ares thought she might actually be the real deal, but after just a minute, she started flailing around and screaming for help. Ayace wasted no time. He yanked off his jacket and bag, then jumped right into the river to save her. Both of them came up gasping for air, but they finally made it out. One of the boys ran over and asked if they were all right. The girl, still buzzing with energy, shot them a thumbs up and said she was fine. Then she handed the toy back to the boys, warning them not to be so careless with it next time. She then turned to Ayace and thanked him for saving her. As Ayace told her not to worry, the girl noticed something was off about the way he was staring at her so intently. When she asked if anything was wrong, Ayace awkwardly blurted out clothes, after realizing her outfit was soaking wet. Embarrassed, she turned away and insisted she didn't usually wear such flashy clothes. Suddenly, the girl got defensive, accusing Ayace of staging the whole thing with the boys just to get a peek at her wet clothes. Ayace denied it faster than Eminem drops a verse and quickly offered her his jacket, saying she could return it later. Before things could get any weirder, he made a speedy exit. Watching him leave, the girl realized he really had helped her, despite all the misunderstandings. It even reminded her a little of her brother, and she found herself hoping they'd meet again someday. When Ayace finally made it home, Ayako asked why he was soaked just from picking up his uniform. Ayace just ignored her. Now, with all the recent weirdness, he was even more anxious about what his new school life would be like. Still, he tried not to overthink it and just went to bed. The next day at school, the girl from the accident, Yuri, sat in class, still fuming and wishing she'd slapped that grabby idiot one more time for what he did. Just then, Nanami, the girl from the bridge, walked in and noticed how mad Yuri looked. Yuri started venting about how she'd been harassed by Mr. Grabby Hands in broad daylight the day before. Nanami was instantly fired up, declaring it totally unforgivable and swearing to help Yuri get even with the creep. But before they could launch their revenge plan, the teacher came in and told everyone to settle down, making Nanami take her seat. Once the class was quiet, the teacher announced a new transfer student and called him in. Ares nervously walked into the classroom and introduced himself. The moment Yuri spotted him, she recognized him as the degenerate from yesterday and shot to her feet, absolutely raging. Ares instantly recognized Yuri as the girl he'd saved and gotten slapped by the day before. He was super confused, wondering why on earth she had to show up here of all places. Then he realized, unlucky for him, they were in the same class. The teacher noticed Yuri glaring at Ares like he was a pile of garbage and asked if she already knew the new guy. Yuri shot back coldly, saying she didn't know the perv. Her savage reply made the teacher chuckle, joking that it sounded like the start of a rom-com. Meanwhile, Ares stood there, totally clueless and not understanding what the teacher was even talking about. Ever since that morning when Ares first met this teacher in the staff room, he'd gotten weird vibes. She kept mumbling about romantic comedy developments, and Ares was pretty sure a few screws were loose upstairs. After introducing him to the class, the unhinged teacher went out of her way to seat him right next to Yuri. As he sat down, Ares could feel Yuri's glare stabbing him in the side. But when he finally glanced over, he realized something he hadn't noticed before. Yuri was seriously a 10 out of 10 hottie with a knockout figure. On any other day, he'd be hyped to sit next to a Riz princess like her, but at that moment, absolutely not. This was a nightmare situation. Unable to tolerate the intense glare any longer, Ares finally broke the silence and asked her to stop staring at him like some jealous ex. Yuri instantly snapped, furious that this creep had the audacity to talk to her after getting all touchy-touchy the day before. Ares tried to explain it was just a misunderstanding and he only wanted to save her from an accident, but Yuri wasn't having it. She demanded a better excuse. Ares considered spilling the beans about his weird future-seeing ability, but knew there was zero chance she'd believe him. So he just let it go. It sucked to already be on someone's hate list his first day at a new school, but honestly, Ares was pretty used to being on his own by now. A few hours later, the teacher announced the end of homeroom, and everyone headed out for lunch, including Yuri. Ares, honestly, was just relieved that his dumpster fire first day was already halfway over. But then, the boy sitting in front of him spun around with a grin and teased Ares about the death glare he'd been getting from Yuri. He wanted to know what Ares had done to earn such cold treatment. Before Ares could answer, the boy introduced himself as Sasayaka Sasuke and pressed again, asking what Ares did to get on Yuri's bad side. Instead of explaining the whole story, Ares just asked if Yuri was really that popular. Sasuke confirmed it. Yuri was basically the hottest girl in school, the black-haired beauty admired by every simp for her cool, Ice Queen vibes. Surprised, Ares quietly told Sasuke about the incident from yesterday, admitting he'd accidentally hugged Yuri, but he left out the whole saving her from danger bit, and just said it happened because he tripped. Just then, a girl called out to Ares. It was Nanami, the same girl who'd nearly become fish food in the river yesterday. Sasuke was shocked seeing Nanami talk to Ares on his first day, and demanded to know how he was already on a first-name basis with both of the school's top-tier beauties. Before Ares could explain, Nanami thanked him for saving her and accidentally blurted out that he might have seen her underwear. Realizing what she just said, she quickly cleared things up, saying there was absolutely nothing spicy between them. Sasuke immediately freaked when he heard the underwear bit and pressed Ares for the details. But before Ares could even open his mouth, Yuri overheard the word underwear and leveled up her suspicion. Now she was fully convinced Ares was the school's #1 creep. Nanami tried to explain, but Yuri just shut her down, telling her to go back to her seat before the weirdo strikes again. Ares wanted to clear up the whole mess, but could only facepalm when he didn't even get the chance. After school, Sasuke offered to walk him home, and Ares agreed. On the way, Sasuke just wouldn't stop hyping up how legendary it was for Ares to be on speaking terms with the two most popular girls in school. But Ares quickly shut him down, saying that, aside from Nanami, his situation with Yuri was nothing to brag about. He explained that it was all just a massive misunderstanding, and that he actually wanted to make things right with her. Sasuke suggested Ares just apologize and clear things up about the whole Mr. Grabby Hands situation, but Ares knew it wouldn't be that easy. Then, suddenly, Ares was hit with another one of his visions. This time, he saw himself taking a spectacular L by falling into a rice field with his bag, getting soaked. Snapping back to reality, he quickly asked Sasuke if there was a rice field up ahead. Sasuke said yes, so Ares immediately suggested they take a different route. Meanwhile, on the way home, Yuri was fuming after hearing Nanami's version of events. She was totally convinced Ares had also taken advantage of Nanami, but Nanami defended him, saying he really was just trying to help. Still, Yuri wasn't having it. She accused Nanami of being way too trusting and insisted Ares was nothing but a perv. In Yuri's mind, Ares was just playing nice so Nanami would lower her guard, then he could try to sneak a peek at her underwear. Even so, Nanami suggested they should at least give Ares a chance to explain himself before making any final judgments. As they walked past the spot where Yuri and Ares first met, Yuri pointed it out and told Nanami that was where Ares had suddenly grabbed her from behind. Nanami was puzzled, wondering why he'd do something like that. Yuri, still bitter, said there's no way anyone could understand what goes on in a creep's head. But when Yuri mentioned Ares saying something about an accident with a yellow car, Nanami suddenly remembered that her dad, the detective, had told her about a yellow sports car that crashed into a utility pole after speeding through that same area the day before. Yuri's eyes went wide as she heard this. She started second-guessing herself, wondering if Ares had been telling the truth all this time and was just trying to save her. She also questioned what would have happened if Ares hadn't been there. Right then, she turned and saw Ares and Sasuke walking by. Ares froze when he saw the girls. After a short pause, he nervously walked up to them and said, "What a coincidence." Next thing you know, Ares is sitting at a cafe with Sasuke, Yuri, and Nanami. He's nervously locking eyes with Yuri, wondering how in the world he got himself into this mess. All he'd wanted was to avoid the tragic future he saw, where he'd fallen into a muddy rice field. But things had taken an unexpected turn, leading to this awkward hangout with Yuri and Nanami. When they'd run into each other, Sasuke, being a loudmouth, suggested they all walk home together and even pitched the idea of stopping for tea, with Ares picking up the tab. Nanami loved the idea, but Yuri wasn't sold at first, until Nanami reminded her they still needed to settle the whole groping misunderstanding with Ares. With that, Yuri agreed, but made sure to warn Ares loud enough for everyone to hear that she wanted something sweet. As they sat together, Sasuke leaned over and whispered to Ares that now was the perfect time to apologize to Yuri. But honestly, Ares had already decided that he was going to clear things up, even before Sasuke said anything. But now there was a new problem: the cafe itself. The owner was none other than Ayako herself, which made the whole situation 100 times more awkward for Ares. Having her around only cranked up his anxiety, and to make it worse, the cafe's first floor was literally the house where he lived. So trying to apologize or have a serious conversation with Yuri was going to be really difficult. Meanwhile, Nanami and Yuri were already diving into their desserts, laughing and chatting about how good everything tasted. Ares, on the other hand, was stuck in his own head, struggling to figure out what to say to Yuri or how to even start the conversation. Every time he tried to talk, Yuri always had a snappy comeback, like she was the undefeated queen of clapbacks. The whole thing just turned into a pointless back and forth. Ares realized that if things kept going downhill, his school life was going to be absolute misery. He didn't want it to get any worse, and having Ayako peering at him from behind the counter just made the whole thing even more tense. Taking a deep breath to psych himself up, Ares finally called out Yuri's name, so loud it almost gave her a heart attack. Without any warning, he slammed his hand on the table, bowed his head, and apologized for everything that happened the day before. Yuri just stared at him in shock, taking a minute to process the situation. But instead of accepting his apology, Yuri hit him with a question she'd been dying to ask. She asked Ares why he'd groped her. Ares, panicking, quickly tried to explain again that he was only trying to pull her out of the way of a car. Yuri wasn't convinced, saying there hadn't been any cars passing by at the time. She did mention, though, that she'd heard about a yellow sports car that crashed nearby later on. But since that accident happened after their run-in, Yuri pressed Ares. She wanted to know how he'd known about the yellow car before it even showed up. Ares was totally caught off guard and froze, trying to come up with a believable answer. Before he could say anything, Sasuke jumped in and said he'd seen that same yellow car speeding around earlier, like the driver was a total maniac. Ares immediately latched onto Sasuke's story, claiming he'd spotted the car before bumping into Yuri. He explained that the driver was going so fast, he figured it'd be dangerous if they happened to be in the way. But from the look on Yuri's face, clearly suspicious, Ares could tell his excuse was about as flimsy as a wet paper bag. After a moment, Yuri sighed and said she'd let things slide for now. Ares was honestly shocked he'd managed to settle things at all and thought maybe, just maybe, tomorrow could finally be a drama-free day. But before he could get too comfortable, Yuri added that she still wasn't fully convinced by his excuse. She pointed out that his story was pretty weak, and the whole hugging her thing, accident or not, was still super sus. So she declared she'd be watching him like a hawk to figure out if he was telling the truth or just naturally sketchy. With a dead serious look, she warned him not to do anything shady. Ares couldn't help but get a little nervous. It was clear the misunderstanding was still hanging over his head, and now he had Yuri's full attention, just waiting for him to slip up. And to make things even more interesting, Yuri suddenly announced that Ares would have to buy her the cafe's parfait 10 whole times, only then would she even consider forgiving him for hugging her. Ares nearly choked, yelling 10 times in pure disbelief. Yuri doubled down, saying an apology alone wasn't enough and that her body was definitely not on discount. Right then, Nanami piped up, cheerfully saying that everything was good now, startling both of them. Ares and Yuri immediately shot her down, insisting things were definitely not fine. Sasuke jumped in too, shrugging and saying that at least, for now, they could call it a partial truce, even if the air was still thick with unresolved drama. Switching things up, Sasuke asked Ares where he lived, and Ares awkwardly pointed out that his house was actually right there, at the cafe, leaving everyone stunned. After hanging out a bit longer, they all headed outside. As Nanami stretched and announced it was time to head home, Sasuke offered to walk the girls, but both of them instantly hit him with a freezing cold no, leaving him feeling like the king of rejection. Yuri and Nanami were still wrapping their heads around the fact that Ares lived at their favorite cafe hangout. For Yuri, this was a nightmare. She now had to worry about running into Ares every time she wanted dessert. Just as the group was about to leave, Ayako stopped them at the door. Yuri asked if they'd forgotten something inside, but Ayako shook her head and just wanted to say thanks. She thanked them for befriending Ares, quietly revealing that he came from a complicated family. Even if he had a bit of an attitude, she hoped they'd keep being kind to him. Sasuke and Nanami smiled and promised to get along with him, and even Yuri reluctantly agreed to try, figuring she didn't have much of a choice now. Just then, someone asked Ayako if it was okay to leave the cafe open with her gone. Ayako said she'd left Ares in charge. When they asked if Ares had ever helped at the cafe before, Ayako admitted this was actually his very first time. Meanwhile, inside, Ares was desperately yelling for Ayako to hurry up and come back, because he literally had no clue how to run a cafe. Even though having the power to see the future sounds like a cheat code for life, for Ares, it was just a headache. His visions popped up at random times and only showed him a few minutes into the future, which was basically useless for anything major. That morning, Ares ended up running late for school. Sure, it was his fault for oversleeping, but Ayako could have at least woken him up. When he complained, Ayako just told him straight up that waking up a sleeping guy wasn't her problem. That was her policy. Since he was already late, Ares figured there was no point in sprinting to school anymore, so he just took his sweet time. Honestly, if his future-seeing powers ever wanted to be helpful, they could at least warn him to wake up early for once. While casually strolling to school, Ares suddenly got hit with another vision. This time, he saw two skinny wannabe gangsters hassling a girl up ahead. The stick-figure boys were trying to pressure her into ditching school to hang out, but the girl wasn't having it. She straight up told them to buzz off. As Ares appeared in front of them in his vision, the two thugs noticed him and told him to keep out of their business. Just as things started to get physical and they tried to drag the girl away, the vision ended and Ares snapped back to reality. Ares sighed, already tired of dealing with yet another headache-inducing vision. Sure enough, after walking a little farther, he reached the exact spot he'd seen. Right as the TikTok tough guys were messing with the girl, just like in his vision. He hesitated, thinking about just minding his own business and walking on by. After all, it technically wasn't his problem. But after a quick inner debate, he changed his mind and decided to step in anyway. He suddenly called out to the girl from behind, apologizing for keeping her waiting. Without even thinking, Ares blurted out that they were supposed to skip school together and go on a date. Even he had no clue what he was doing or why that was the first thing out of his mouth. There were definitely smarter ways to handle it, but it was too late now. The two wannabe thugs turned to him, surprised, and demanded to know if he was her boyfriend. Ares just stood there, silent and awkward because in reality, he didn't even know the girl's name. But then, to his surprise, the girl rolled with it. She grabbed his arm and scolded him for being late, pretending like they really were a couple. She complained that his tardiness was the whole reason these two weirdos were bothering her in the first place. Ares was completely speechless. He had no idea what was happening anymore. But the girl wasted no time and quickly told him to get moving. When the wannabe thugs tried to block their escape, the girl shouted for Ares to hurry up and run. Still dazed and confused, Ares had no choice but to sprint away with her. Later, they ended up catching their breath under a bridge. Ares, panting, admitted he never thought they'd actually have to break into a full-on sprint. He was exhausted. The girl apologized with a smile and thanked him for stepping in, but Ares just sat there, not really sure how to respond. Then she turned to him and asked why he'd helped her. Ares tried to come up with an answer, but before he could, she started teasing, asking if he was hoping for something in return. Ares was totally caught off guard by how forward she was. She scooted closer, put her hand on his thigh, and with a smirk, thanked him again for saving her, then boldly told him to get jiggy with her. Ares was so stunned by her move, he almost creamed his pants right there. But before he could even stammer out a reply, the girl laughed and said she was just kidding. She cracked up at how edgy he got, then stood up and said they should get going. Still flustered, Ares asked where exactly they were supposed to go now. The girl grinned and reminded him that, by his own words, they were supposed to be skipping school for a date. She finally introduced herself as Bayashi, and Ares introduced himself back. Bayashi looked around, unimpressed with the area, and suggested they hop a train to the next town instead. Ares, still in shock, realized he was about to go on his very first date completely by accident. When they got to the next town, the first thing they did was grab some crepes. Bayashi was having the time of her life, laughing, smiling, just totally vibing, while Ares was hanging on by a thread trying to act normal. After getting some drinks, Bayashi said she wanted to shop for new clothes, and while they were at it, she spotted a photo booth and dragged Ares in for a picture to commemorate their date. She was clearly enjoying every second, but Ares just felt more and more worn out as the day went on. Once the shopping spree ended, Ares glanced at the pile of bags and asked how Bayashi planned to haul them all. She shrugged and said not to worry, she'd just call a taxi. Remembering there was a taxi stand nearby, she suggested they just head over. Watching how easily she spent money without thinking much, Ares couldn't help but wonder if Bayashi was secretly Elon Musk's lost daughter or something. As they headed toward the taxi, Bayashi suddenly asked what year Ares was in. He told her he was a second year, and she seemed surprised they were the same age. She admitted she hadn't recognized him before, thinking he might be a newbie. Ares explained that he'd just transferred last week. Bayashi quickly put two and two together and realized Ares was the rumored transfer student everyone had been whispering about. When Ares tried to ask what kind of rumors, she dodged the question, promising to spill another time. When they reached the taxi, just before getting in, Bayashi told Ares not to be shy if he saw her at school. She leaned in close and whispered in his ear that, if he ever wanted, she'd help him graduate from being a lonely virgin. With that, she grinned, hopped into the taxi, and left Ares standing there, totally frazzled and questioning all his life choices. Meanwhile, after getting out of the taxi, Bayashi pulled out the photo they'd taken together. Smiling, she thought about how much fun Ares was to mess with. She laughed again at the memory, but deep down, she knew he was actually a solid guy. As she headed toward a nearby skyscraper, she quietly wondered if they'd bump into each other again at school. The next day at school, Sasuke came up to Ares and asked why he'd skipped class the day before. He teased him, warning not to come up with some wild excuse like hanging out with a girl. Ares immediately stiffened, since that was literally what he'd done. But too shy to admit he'd spent the day with the mysterious Bayashi, he just said he'd slept at home all day. As they walked together, Sasuke kept ranting about how awesome it'd be to randomly meet a cute girl. And as if on cue, he suddenly bumped heads with someone while turning a corner. Annoyed, Sasuke told the person to watch it, only to realize it was Bayashi. Ares' eyes went wide in surprise, and after briefly locking eyes with him, Bayashi quickly bolted down the hall. Sasuke couldn't help but be surprised, joking that Ares somehow had the magical ability to make Bayashi run for her life. Curious, Ares asked if she was some kind of celebrity. Sasuke explained that Bayashi was basically surrounded by all sorts of wild rumors, especially the one about her having a dangerous delinquent boyfriend from Higashi High, the toughest, most notorious school in town. As soon as Ares heard Higashi High, it clicked. Those were the same wannabe thugs who tried to mess with Bayashi yesterday. Still, he doubted the rumor, since Bayashi didn't seem like the type to be dating a delinquent. He asked Sasuke if the story was even true, but Sasuke just shrugged and said that's what everyone claimed. They kept chatting as they headed to class. As soon as Ares took his seat, Yuri marched right up and demanded to know why he'd skipped school the day before. He told her he wasn't feeling well and just needed some rest. But as he talked, Ares noticed something different. Yuri wasn't glaring at him with her usual death stare. Her expression had definitely softened. Yuri wasn't buying his excuse and flat out said she didn't believe him. When Ares asked why she even cared about his absence, Yuri snapped back that it actually made things difficult for her. Confused, he asked what she meant, and Yuri huffed that she'd had to do all the health committee work by herself while he was gone. Ares was totally confused. He didn't even remember signing up for any committee. Yuri explained that she was the girls' health committee rep, but since no other guy wanted the job, the teacher just randomly picked Ares as the boys' rep. Ares was surprised to hear that the teacher had chosen him without even asking, especially in his absence. It was clear the crazy teacher did it just to push her rom-com agenda. Yuri pointed out that, thanks to his absence, all the committee work had landed on her. So to pay her back, she demanded that Ares handle all the committee duties by himself today. Ares agreed, thinking it'd just be a few quick rounds and he'd be done. But then Yuri added that she'd set up a special task just for him. Ares was now in charge of watching over the nurse's office until the school nurse got back from her errands. Later that day, Ares was stuck in the nurse's office, fuming and cursing Yuri under his breath for dumping such a lame, boring task on him. He was completely worn out and just wanted to go home, especially since no one had even come in the whole time. Slumped over the table, frustrated, he suddenly got hit with another one of his annoying future visions. This time, he saw himself on the basketball court, watching as a girl from the team suddenly collapsed, grabbing her calf in pain while her teammates rushed to help. Just as quickly as it started, the vision faded, and Ares snapped back to reality. Ares tried to piece together his vision, wondering who the injured girl could be, when suddenly a voice called out from outside the room. A girl walked in, asking if she could enter. Since the teacher wasn't there, she came over and asked Ares if he was the health committee guy. When he confirmed, she explained that she'd run out of sports tape during basketball practice and just needed him to tell the nurse she was borrowing some. Ares told her to go ahead and take what she needed. She sat down and tried to tape her own foot but was clearly struggling, making a mess of it. After watching her fumble for a while, Ares finally offered to help. The girl happily accepted, showing him her ankle. Ares instantly regretted volunteering, realizing he'd have to actually touch her leg, but after battling his nerves for a few minutes, he managed to wrap her ankle pretty clean. Clearly happy, the girl thanked him for the help. Ares asked if she'd sprained her ankle, and she confirmed it. Then she asked if he was the new transfer student. When he said yes, she told him not to be so formal. They were the same age, after all. She introduced herself as Suika from the basketball team, and Ares introduced himself too. After thanking him again, Suika said she had to get back to practice and headed out. As soon as she left, Ares was hit with another wave of boredom. He started thinking about his earlier vision, the injured girl collapsing on the basketball court, and began to suspect it might have been Suika. A sense of urgency crept in, realizing that if she practiced with an injured leg, she might actually end up hurting herself even worse. Right then, the teacher came back, but Ares wasted no time. He slipped out of the office and hurried straight to the basketball hall. When he got there, he was worried he might already be too late. But seeing the team practicing like normal, he started to think he'd just been overthinking it. Suika looked totally fine as she played, and Ares noticed her injury was on her left leg. In his vision, though, it had been her right leg, so maybe he'd just mixed things up, and the girl in his vision wasn't even Suika. But just as he was about to leave, a sudden shout echoed across the gym, someone yelling to check if Suika was okay. Ares whipped around and saw Suika collapsed on the floor, this time clutching her right leg in agony. Ares instantly realized the injured girl in his vision was Suika after all. He regretted not figuring it out sooner and stopping her before things got worse. Rushing over, he asked if she was okay. As he checked on her, he noticed that, thankfully, she wasn't as bad off as she'd been in his vision. In his premonition, she looked completely devastated, but right now, even though she was hurting, she seemed to be handling it a little better. When Ares asked if she'd taken a bad fall, Suika replied that she'd just lost her balance. Ares was confused. It seemed like somehow the future had changed. When he inquired about her foot, she said she was fine, though her right ankle did feel a bit uncomfortable. At that moment, the rest of the basketball girls crowded around to listen in. That's when some random girl with a high ponytail chimed in, saying Suika definitely needed to go to the infirmary, even though Suika kept saying she was fine and her ankle felt okay. Not taking no for an answer, Ponytail Girl pointed straight at Ares and told him to give Suika a piggyback ride to the nurse's office. Ares was surprised and asked why he should be the one to do it. The girl explained that there were only girls present, and besides, since Ares had rushed over out of concern for Suika, and as a member of the health committee, he was the perfect man for the job. Reluctantly, Ares agreed to piggyback Suika and started walking toward the infirmary, all the while reflecting on how he always ended up in troublesome situations. Along the way, Suika told him she could walk on her own, but Ares refused, warning her that forcing herself to walk might make her injury worse. When she nervously asked if she was too heavy for him, Ares reassured her he was perfectly fine carrying her. Suika then apologized for putting Ares in such an awkward spot, and Ares apologized right back for butting in on their club's practice. But Suika brushed it off, saying he hadn't done anything wrong. In fact, she was the one making him do the heavy lifting. As they continued, Suika started to open up to Ares on a more personal level. She admitted she never really felt all that feminine, and even the boys in her class just treated her like one of them bros. She didn't totally hate it, but sometimes she secretly wished people would see her as a baddie, not just as the resident alpha male. Right after that, Suika seemed to remember something and suddenly got serious. She asked Ares why he'd come to the sports hall in the first place. Ares panicked, scrambling for an answer, and finally just blurted out that he was worried about her foot. But Suika wasn't buying it and pressed him, wanting to know how he managed to show up right as things went down, almost like he knew in advance. Ares, flustered, immediately exclaimed, no denying it on the spot. But Suika wasn't ready to let the matter go. She curiously asked if he could see the future. Ares froze instantly, speechless. He could barely breathe, let alone say anything. Suika stared at him for a second before breaking into a laugh, saying there was no way he could see the future. She explained that she'd only asked because she'd watched some drama the night before where the main character had a similar power. When they finally got to the infirmary, Suika hopped off his back, insisting she could handle things from there. As Ares turned to leave, she called out his name and thanked him with a real, heartfelt smile. That moment made Ares pause. He realized that his strange ability hadn't exactly made life easier. In fact, it usually brought more headaches than anything else. But today, for the first time, he thought maybe having this weird power wasn't completely awful. The next day at school, Sasuke stormed up to Ares, yelling about betrayal and demanding to know if Ares had a girlfriend now. Before Ares could defend himself, Sasuke accused him of capping hard. Sasuke explained that everyone had seen Ares carrying some chick from the basketball team like a Disney princess. Ares denied it again, trying to clarify that he'd only given the girl a piggyback ride. And besides, he was honestly shocked at how fast rumors could spread. Right then, Yuri jumped in, sarcastically roasting Ares for bagging a girlfriend so soon after transferring. She claimed it only proved what a mega creep he was. Then she switched topics and grilled him about his committee work. Ares answered that he'd properly watched the infirmary yesterday. When she asked if he'd checked the hygiene products, he sheepishly admitted he forgot, then asked if that was why she seemed upset. Yuri went quiet and Sasuke leaned over, whispering in Ares' ear that he was a clueless idiot, because Yuri was clearly just being Yandir jealous. After a short, awkward silence, Yuri scolded Ares for skipping his committee duties while still having the nerve to go around princess-carrying random girls. She said anyone would get annoyed if their partner bailed on their half of the work. Ares tried to explain himself, but Yuri cut him off, insisting she didn't care who he dated. She just expected him to actually show up for the committee meeting at lunch. When Ares complained that he always seemed to be the only one at those meetings, Yuri flatly told him it was payback for skipping school 2 days in a row. Ares pointed out that committee meetings were supposed to be once a month, but Yuri explained this one was special, for an upcoming event happening the following week. Still confused, Ares turned to Sasuke and asked what was happening next week. Sasuke grinned and thanked him for asking, then hit him with the big reveal. The school was doing a mountain climbing trip. The day of the outdoor school trip, mountain hiking, finally arrived. Sasuke immediately noticed Ares' miserable face and asked why he looked so dead inside. In return, Ares questioned why Sasuke was so overly hyped about mountain climbing. For the event, each class had been divided into groups, and each group was assigned to head toward designated checkpoints. As the hike kicked off, Ares couldn't help but notice that, even though this was supposed to be a chance to mix with new people, he was still stuck with his same squad: Sasuke, Yuri, and Nanami. After a while, Yuri started scolding the boys for trailing behind, demanding to know why they were slower than a BBL patient. She snapped that, at this rate, they'd never reach the checkpoint on time. Nanami then asked if the guys were tired and offered to stop for a break, but Yuri insisted the boys were just lazy and needed to move their badonkadonks. Ares found mountain hiking miserable on its own, but adding group drama made it way worse. Suddenly, Nanami pointed out a girl ahead who seemed to have gotten separated from her group. This girl was none other than Bayashi, Ares' second headache of the day. Even though she was from another class, their paths kept crossing in weird ways. Turns out, the reason Bayashi landed in Ares' hiking group was because of his homeroom teacher. Right as the hike began, the teacher pulled Ares aside and asked if he knew Bayashi. When he admitted he kind of did, the teacher got all starry-eyed about their love comedy vibes. She begged Ares to look out for Bayashi, since she tended to isolate herself. The teacher's rom-com obsession left Ares no room to argue, so he got stuck with the job, like it or not. Now, Bayashi was in their group but was clearly drifting away from everyone and chose to stay right in front of them. Ares faced the tough decision of how to bring her closer to the group. Nanami also expressed concern about the girl being alone, but Yuri bluntly said to leave her be. Nanami tried to nudge Yuri to be a little friendlier, but Yuri flat out said Nanami was the only person she cared to be friends with. Ares was concerned about Bayashi and wanted to include her, which angered Yuri, who immediately began protesting the idea of Bayashi joining their group. But before she could say more, Nanami enthusiastically agreed and rushed over to talk to Bayashi. Ares felt relieved, thinking he'd just dodged an awkward bullet. If Bayashi turned them down, at least they could tell the teacher they tried. But then, out of nowhere, Bayashi turned, looked Ares straight in the eyes, walked right up to him and asked him to take care of her. The whole invite Bayashi in plan had unexpectedly worked, but now the group vibe was officially tense, with Bayashi hanging close to the guys and totally ignoring the girls. After a while, Bayashi complained that her legs had gone numb and muttered that she wouldn't have come if she'd known it would be like this. Nanami, trying to ease the mood, agreed that hiking was tough and kindly offered for Bayashi to join them so they could chat as a distraction. But Bayashi coldly walked past her and warned her to stop with the fake friendly attitude. Bayashi's rudeness immediately set Yuri off. She yelled at Bayashi, saying she shouldn't act that way toward Nanami, especially after Nanami had taken the time to let her join their group. But instead of apologizing, Bayashi shot back, saying that she never asked to be included in the group in the first place. Sensing things were about to go nuclear, Ares quickly stepped in, urging everyone to stop. Bayashi then turned her aggression on him, demanding to know whose side he was on. Ares tried to keep the peace, insisting he wasn't taking sides, but Yuri wasn't having it. She snapped that she didn't care whose side he took, but warned him that if he chose Bayashi, he'd better watch out. Everyone knew Bayashi was the queen of players, swapping boys out like used tampons. Yuri told Ares straight up that Bayashi would just use him and toss him aside like yesterday's trash. Hearing this, Bayashi turned and started walking away, saying it was obvious her presence wasn't wanted. Just as she left, Nanami volunteered to go after her, but Yuri, still angry, told her to leave the flirt tramp alone. Nanami, now fed up, grabbed Yuri's hand and shouted at her to stop already, saying she'd gone way out of line with the harsh things she'd said to Bayashi. Ares then stepped in, saying he would go after Bayashi himself since she couldn't have gone far. As he started searching, he silently grumbled about how this whole thing was a pain. But he couldn't just abandon her when the teacher had made him responsible, and he didn't want anything to happen that could get him in trouble. After walking for a while, he eventually found Bayashi sitting by a tree, so he sat down beside her. From her demeanor, it was clear she had no intention of returning to the group, which made him wonder what to do about the situation. Suddenly, out of the blue, Bayashi asked if he hated her. Caught off guard, Ares blurted out why she'd think that and asked if it was because of what Yuri had said earlier. Bayashi nodded in confirmation. However, Ares reassured her he didn't hate her at all. When she pressed him for a reason, Ares explained that from the way she acted and carried herself, she was exactly who he expected, so there was nothing to judge. He told her all the crazy rumors about her seemed fake to him anyway. Ares even remembered his vision where Bayashi genuinely looked uncomfortable with those guys hitting on her. That alone proved she wasn't who people made her out to be. He finished by telling her that he didn't care if she toyed with boys or not. She should just live her life however she wanted. He said he never bothered with other people's opinions. That was his own principle for living. Bayashi looked at him, almost amused, and said he was kind of weird and she'd expected a more clever response from him. Ares just shrugged and admitted cheering people up wasn't really his thing. Bayashi's mood lightened a bit. She sighed and said maybe they should head back since she didn't want his friends gossiping about him, and Ares agreed. But suddenly she gave him a mischievous smile and teased that, since they were alone, maybe they should do something nice. Ares, totally blindsided, froze up. Bayashi burst out laughing, revealing she was just joking and calling him out for being such a hopeless virgin. Flustered, Ares stammered that anyone would have reacted that way. As they started walking back, Ares asked her to try being a little nicer to the others, and Bayashi replied that she'd think about it. For the first time that day, Ares felt a bit of relief, hoping no more problems would arise. But as soon as they returned, Sasuke ran up, panic written all over his face, and told him that Nanami was now missing. Meanwhile, Nanami found herself in the middle of the woods, with absolutely no idea where she was. Earlier, she'd separated from the group when she decided to chase after Bayashi, even though Ares had already gone after her. Sasuke had tried to stop her, but Nanami was determined to find them. After walking some distance through the woods, she still couldn't find them and ended up farther away from everyone than she realized. She started to wonder if she'd missed the path and decided it was best to head back. But as she started walking, she accidentally tripped and fell, spraining her knee. With a sad look on her face, Nanami was frustrated, wondering what the heck she was doing. She started to remember how, once in the past, she'd been in a similar situation, stuck in a lonely place with nobody to help her. Lost in that sad thought, she suddenly heard someone calling her name in the distance. She turned and saw a faint, shadowy figure asking if she was okay. As her eyes finally cleared, she realized it was Ares who was asking if she could hear him. Ares walked over to where she was sitting on the ground and told her that Bayashi was back with the others and everyone was worried about her, especially Yuri. When Nanami apologized for making everyone worry, Ares brushed it off and told her he was just glad she was safe. Nanami's heart skipped a beat when she heard this. Ares then suggested they head back to where the group was, and she agreed. As they walked back, Nanami was lost in thought, realizing that whenever she talked with Ares, her heart seemed to beat unusually hard. Just then, Ares snapped her out of it by asking her to walk closer to his side. He explained that the path she was on looked a bit damp and might be slippery. Nanami thanked him and did as he instructed. As she walked, she reflected on how kind Ares was. She remembered the first time they met at the bridge when Ares had dived into the river to save her, and now, once again, she was being rescued by him. Suddenly, Ares grabbed her hand and pulled her closer into an embrace. She immediately became flustered, and Ares, just as surprised, froze in shock. He quickly pulled away and apologized, explaining that he saw her drifting toward the slippery side of the path and thought it looked really dangerous. Nanami smiled and thanked him. Ares then suggested they keep walking. After a while, they finally met up with the group. The moment Yuri saw Nanami, she ran up to her and hugged her, thanking God she was safe. When Nanami apologized for making them all worry, Bayashi also apologized for her bad manners earlier. She promised to be more considerate and asked if they could all get along until they reached their destination. Nanami agreed, but advised her to try talking to everyone and not keep to herself. Ares noticed Yuri staring at him strangely and asked what was wrong. Yuri shyly thanked him for saving Nanami, but then demanded to know if he'd done anything suspicious to her while they were alone. When Ares denied doing anything to Nanami, Yuri turned to Nanami and asked if it was true that Ares hadn't done anything. Nanami, a bit taken aback by the question, immediately thought about the accidental hug they'd shared, but with a blushing face, told Yuri that Ares did nothing to her. Yuri stared at her intently and noticed how red her face was. In disbelief, she turned back to Ares and demanded to know what the heck he'd done to Nanami. Ares froze and tried to explain that he'd done nothing. Yuri insisted that, judging by Nanami's expression, she doubted it. Soon, Yuri and Ares were arguing about the issue, while Nanami just stood there trying to figure out if her face was red because of the hot weather or for another reason. Several hours later, they finally arrived at the checkpoint. Yuri announced that she and Nanami would handle preparing the curry, leaving Ares with the strenuous task of setting up the tent. Nanami offered to help with the tent, but Ares declined, noting her injury and advising her to stick with helping Yuri. As he moved to the spot to set up the tent, Ares grumbled inwardly about being left alone, wishing Sasuke were around to help. But he remembered that Sasuke had been tasked with gathering firewood for the curry. When he got to the spot, Ares noticed that tents were set up separately for boys and girls, but most groups had both boys and girls working together to set up their tents. Sadly, Ares was left all alone, setting up the tents for his group. Suddenly, he heard someone call out his name. He turned to see Suika, smiling and running toward him. When she got close, Ares remembered the incident on the basketball court where she'd injured her ankle and asked if it was any better. Suika excitedly shook her leg and said she was totally fine now. Then she told him she hadn't been allowed to hike like the other students, but had been dropped at the checkpoint by the teacher in a car. She noticed Ares holding the tent materials and asked if he was going to set up the tents by himself. Before Ares could answer, Suika immediately offered to help. Ares tried to decline, asking if her group didn't need her to help with the curry, but Suika insisted. She said everyone in her group was terrible at cooking, so the others had gone off to eat with other groups. When Ares curiously asked if that was even allowed, Suika said as long as the teacher doesn't know, it's fine. Also, Suika mentioned that Bayashi was in her group, so since she didn't want Bayashi to be left alone, she'd have to help her with the curry later. While Bayashi had gone to get the ingredients, Suika said she had some free time and wanted to spend it helping Ares with whatever he needed. Ares didn't have much choice, so he reluctantly agreed. Suika eagerly offered to help carry the tent materials. Ares handed her some of the load, but insisted she didn't need to, since it was pretty heavy. Suika assured him she was fine. Still, Ares felt bad for making a girl carry such a heavy load. Suika was taken aback by Ares calling her a girl. She asked if he really saw her that way and then explained she was used to setting up her own group's tent. She confidently declared she was stronger than most of the femme boys around. Ares told her it didn't matter and insisted that if she wanted to help, she should take the lighter load. When he gave her the lighter stuff, Suika's face brightened and she thanked him. A few minutes later, the tent was set up. Ares was grateful for Suika's help, thanking her and acknowledging that he finished so quickly because of her. Suika was delighted to be of help and told him to call on her anytime he needed assistance. After that, she left for her group, saying Bayashi should be back soon. But just as Suika left, Ares was suddenly struck by one of his visions, but this time, it was so short he didn't even see anything. Snapping back to reality, Ares decided to check on the girls and see how the cooking was going. But when he got there, it was total chaos. The pot of curry was on the floor, soup everywhere. When Ares, shocked, asked what happened, Yuri coldly asked if he was blind, not able to figure it out just by looking. She explained that the fire was too high thanks to Sasuke. Sasuke defended himself, saying she was the one who said she preferred a bigger fire to simmer the curry. They all started arguing, and Nanami jumped in, saying she'd seen the cooking pot emitting thick black smoke. She was so shocked, she tried to extinguish it, but in her panic, she accidentally knocked the pot over. Ares figured this was what his precognitive vision was trying to warn him about, and wished it had come earlier. When he suggested they make the soup from scratch, Nanami informed him they were out of ingredients. Sasuke sadly pointed out they only had rice and no soup. But someone quickly reminded them that even the rice was burnt, now just black rice. It was obvious their group wasn't going to have dinner that night. Just as all hope seemed lost, Ares had an idea. He remembered Suika had said everyone in her group was bad at cooking and had gone to eat with other groups. He figured if they went to Suika's group, there should be ingredients left to use. He quickly told his team he had an idea and would be back soon. Ares made his way to Suika's tent and found her and Bayashi. He asked if they could have dinner together, and Suika replied she had just been discussing with Bayashi how there'd be more than enough food for 2 people. However, she clarified they were still cooking and asked Ares to wait a bit. But when Ares leaned in to check, he could only see a food crime scene. He figured if he left the girls alone, they'd just end up with another disaster, so he offered to help cook. The girls were stunned at first, wondering if Ares could really cook, but quickly decided anyone's cooking would be better than theirs. With that, Ares took over, and soon the curry soup was ready. Sasuke, Yuri, and Nanami arrived later and were shocked to see actual edible food waiting. They found it hard to believe Ares had cooked, but thanked him anyway. However, Ares was quick to point out it was all thanks to Suika and her group, who had provided the ingredients. When Suika happily suggested they all dig in, Nanami paused and asked Ares when he'd become so close to Suika. When she asked if they were dating or something, everybody froze, turning their attention to Ares, waiting for his response. You see a harem brewing between Ares and the girls? Comment sudden visions if you're eager to find out in our part 2. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.